Now, these are young people who study in our schools, they play in our neighborhoods, they're friends with our kids, they pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper.
That program's called DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It lets you apply every 2 years to have your deportation delayed. In over 20 states, it's enough to get in-state tuition. And Georgia might become one of those 20 because of this lawsuit. Charles Cook is an immigration attorney representing the group of students suing the board.
Well, this case started when a group of 7 activists, dreamers, kids that were both DACA eligible and had gone to high school here and wanted to go to college, came to me and said, the Board of Regents policy is unjust.
Cook wrote an article online about the policy, and he said he knew what they could do.
Well, the only solution was to sue the state.
Here's where all this started. Back in 2010, the board was involved in a nationwide controversy over how many undocumented students they were admitting and what their tuition rates were. So they created a committee of board members, university presidents, and USG staffers called the Residency Verification Committee to find out.
Good morning, Regents. I'll call this reconvened session.
In an October 2010 meeting, Regent James Jolly presented the committee's findings to the board. That committee found that there were a total of 500 undocumented students in the university system, but that a grand total of 2 of them could be conceivably considered as taking the place of a Georgia resident, and that USG schools were not being inundated by undocumented students. Despite all that, with 14 regents voting for and Regents Jenkins and Tucker voting against, the board still approved Policy 416. The ACLU of Georgia sent the board a letter saying the policy was fundamentally unjust. UGA's own university council sent a letter asking them to get rid of it, calling it fundamentally against the mission of promoting education. On the other side, a group of Republican state lawmakers sent the board a letter saying they were disappointed and perplexed that the board hadn't banned undocumented students from all its universities instead of just 5. And activists on both sides question the reasoning behind the policy and why it's written the way it is.
They could see was us sharpening the law in the legislature to make the language more clear. So they kind of split the baby in half. And
Charles Cook says the same thing. He thinks there are board members who don't like this policy but are scared of the legislature.
Again, because I believe that the majority of the Board of Regents wants to give these kids in-state tuition. They're just looking for a legal backstop and a protection from the state legislature coming in.
Why do you believe that? Just because that's what it seems like, or?
It is clear, a number of members of the Board of Regents have essentially said that, either impliedly or explicitly, to members of the plaintiffs of this group.
But I'm assuming you can't tell me who?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
they're erring on the side of not looking to be somehow mean to young people who are here illegally.
If this court case continues to go through, and let's say the plaintiffs win this court case, the board says, well, now we're forced to let all of them in. Sorry. That sort of political cover?
I think your explanation is very astute and right on the money, yes, sir.
They don't begrudge these kids, really. I believe the Board of Regents is simply protecting their power, nothing more.
On Friday, the Board of Regents will argue in front of the state Supreme Court that the students don't have the right to sue them. If the board loses, Charles Cook can make his case, and he doesn't think too highly of 416.
This has nothing to do with public policy or good public policy. In fact, it's monumentally bad public policy.
But mostly, he says it all comes down to the wording. The board says you have to have lawful presence to go to the top 5 schools. The Department of Homeland Security says students who have DACA are not unlawfully present. The board says that doesn't count. Cook says it does.
The opposite of not accruing unlawful presence is lawful presence. That's the way immigration law works.
He also says he thinks the board probably wrote this policy without any legal advice.
And they adopted this lawful presence standard, likely without understanding that lawful presence had an actual meaning.
I wanted a second opinion, so I asked D.A. King the same question. Do you think they have a case there?
With the term lawful presence, I certainly do.
That response might surprise some people, since King is in favor of the ban. But he said the board's policy is written so badly that technically the students are right.
and some court says that they are illegal aliens, which they are, and we recognize they do not have legal status, which they don't, and then somebody wants to start playing the redefinition of the English language word game by saying, but they have lawful presence. And if the regulation written by the Board of Regents has lawful presence, I think they have a terrific case.
But he did say the board could make this whole thing go away by adding just 3 words to their policy.
And legal status. That would end this for once and for all. It would stop any court action. The lawyer, Cook, would walk away because he would have no case.
They could have used lawful status, which these kids don't have. And we've made clear, hey, you can change the policy to say lawful status. They haven't changed the policy.
This whole case hinges on just 3 words, and legal status. And that might not sound like much, but they write huge law books like this one on cases that hinge on just a couple words or on just a comma. But legal presence, lawful status, for these kids, none of that really matters. They're just waiting on the state to figure out whether or not they'll be allowed to go to school. And it could be years before we know for sure. For Gritty News Source, I'm Dylan Richards.
In the fall, I will follow.